And we're off. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Nice to see you all back here. We're going to start a new Go show. It's not a very long one, so we may get it done in this. I think we'll get it done here. This is an interesting Go show in that you've all heard and maybe you've read the entirety of, or at least part of, the Risho and Kokuran, otherwise known as On Establishing the Correct Teaching for the Peace of the Land. There are a few Gosho that are similar in title, but this speaks to the Risho and Kokuran specifically because, as I said in an earlier video, the philosophical practices and religious practices of countries was often, if not always, the governmenting form of government imposed on the populace way back to kingdoms and serfdoms throughout the land. There was always an advisor, and that advisor was generally of some kind of a spiritual nature. Now, I like to say in Buddhism that spiritual means mental, but not mental as in, but mental as in our mind and brain working to solve problems, problem solving, critical thinking. That is a spiritual endeavor. But you could cast that word away altogether if you don't like it. I often haven't. And I don't prefer to use it in matters of the complete teachings of Buddhism. Be that as it may, in some Asian countries, it is Buddhism, some form of Buddhism, or Buddhism outright, that is the template for the rule of the nation, the correct behavior of people, but not just on the individual basis. And in this way, it mirrors a bit of what Aristotle would say. Aristotle would say that governance starts with the individual, with the self. And from there goes to the self and family, and from family to community, and from community to area or region, and from regions to nation or country. Buddhism is very much this way. Religions tend to be the other way around. They tend to be some huge ideological entity imposed upon the masses of the bottom of the pyramid. I know it's still a peak, it's a small elite group, but they form an overarching concentration of wealth and power, rather than democratically pushing power throughout the pyramid, the hierarchy, so that the hierarchy it becomes somewhat inverted, much like Dr. Wolf talks about economy. So here in our current day, we're experiencing that not just in the United States, but all over the world. Which is odd, particularly in the United States, because the Constitution and the framers of the way this country should be run were very much against this pyramid of power elite at the top and just the serfdom beneath it. These are the amendments and the clauses in the Constitution regarding tyranny. And those of you who are fans of the Second Amendment, that's what you should be thinking about. We are experiencing a drastic move to tyranny. And if you want to use another word because that one is offensive to you, think of it as authoritarian. Not that, and people like authoritarianship in general because people are lazy and they like to just be told what to do and they do it. The problem with that, though, is that at some point you don't know how to edit what is proper to do and what is against your own best interest to do, because you're just busy following orders. That is authoritarianism. And when it pushes power more and more toward a small elite, small in relation to the entirety, you have fascism. So, Nietzsche, the reason I say all that isn't to be a pundit on today's socioeconomics, but just to show you how this is indicative of human population, because in Nichiren's time, he was facing the same problem. And what he observed was that the leaders of the countries went to Buddhism and Shinto and other things, non-Buddhist teachings, looking at those leaders to provide a framework to answer their problems, give them some type of prayer, some type of meditation to make things better. But of course, what Nichiren is going to point out is that you can't pray away a hurricane or an earthquake, but that the mental health of the populace has an effect, so much an effect on the nation, that it actually affects the health of the nation. Now, this may seem like pushing the boundaries, but bear with me. The lessons in this, in the Risho and Kokuran, are quite profound. Take a while to digest and reread. This isn't the Risho and Kokuran. This is the rationale for writing it. So you can get a glimpse into his motivations to write this huge treatise that he's well known for, and certainly ruffled more than a few feathers in the rulers and governments, and not just the rulers, not even so much as the rulers, the leaders of other philosophy, religions, Buddhist and non-Buddhist, really, quite frankly, pissed them off. So he didn't care about that. He just cared about what is obvious, correct, common sense, and what thousands of years of scholarship indicated. And this is Nichiren to his core. He's a scholar. So here we go. The rationale for writing on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land. He didn't say the peace of the people. He includes them, but he's very specific in saying this is for peace entirely. In Buddhism, your world, my world, they're all unique to us, but collectively they are the world that we, samsara, participate in and affect. Okay? In the first year of the Shoka era, 1257, with the cyclical sign Hinotomi, on the 23rd day of the 8th month, at the time when the hour of the dog gives way to the hour of the boar, around 9 p.m., there occurred an earthquake of unprecedented magnitude. In the second year of the same era, cyclical sign Tsuchinoe Uma, on the first day of the 8th month, there was a great wind. In the third year, cyclical sign Tsuchinoto Itsuji, a major famine occurred. In the first year of the Shogun era, 1259, cyclical sign Chutinoto Hitsuji, epidemics were rampant. And throughout the 4 seasons of the second year, cyclical sign Kanoe Saru, the epidemics continued to rage without abating. By this time, more than half the people of the nation had been laid down by death. Half the population. The ruler of the country, alarmed at this state of affairs, who wouldn't be, turned to the scriptures of Buddhism and the non-Buddhist writings for help, ordering that various meditations be offered. These, however, failed to produce the slightest effect. On the contrary, famine and epidemics raged more fiercely than ever. I, Nichiren, observing this state of affairs, proceeded to consult the great collection of Buddhist scriptures, scholarship, There I discovered the reason why these meditations are without effect and on the contrary actually make the situation worse, along with passages of proof to support it. In the end, I had no other recourse than to compile a work to present my findings, entitled it On Establishing the Correct Teaching for the Peace of the Land. In the first year of Bunyo, era 1260, cyclical sign Kanoe Saru, on the 16th day of the 7th month, at the hour of the dragon, 7 to 9 a.m., I handed it to the lay priest Yadoya for the presentation to his lord, the lay priest of Saimyoji, who is now deceased. This I did solely that I might repay the debt of gratitude that I owed to my native land. So this is out of his patriotism. The essence of this memorial is as follows. Buddhism was first introduced from the kingdom of Pache to Japan during the reign of Emperor Kimei, the 13th of the human sovereigns, in the 100 reigns of sovereigns following the 7 reigns of the heavenly deities and the 5 reigns of the earthly deities. So this is a formal invocation. From that time until the reign of Emperor Kamu, the 50th human sovereign, a period of some 260 years, the various Buddhist scriptures were brought to Japan, as well as the 6 schools of Buddhism. At this time, however, the Tendai and True Word schools had not yet been introduced. During the reign of Emperor Kamu, there was a young priest named Saicho, who was a disciple of the administrator of priests, Gyohyo, of Yamashina-dera Temple. He later came to be known as the great teacher Dengyo. He made a thorough study of the 6 schools that had been introduced to Japan earlier, as well as of the Zen doctrine, but none of these seemed to satisfy him. Earlier, in the reign of Emperor Shomu, the Reverend Chen Ganjin of Tang, China, had come to Japan and brought with him the commentaries of Tendai. 40 or more years had passed, and Saicho was the first person to pursue them and understand the profound meaning of Buddhism. In the 4th year of Enraku era, 785, Saicho founded a temple on Mount Hiei in order to ensure the continuance of peace in heaven and on earth. Emperor Kamu paid honor to the new establishment, designating it as a place of worship where meditations could be offered to the guardian star of the ruler. He ceased to heed the teachings of the 6 schools and instead gave wholeheartedly allegiance to the perfect doctrines of the Tendai school. In the 13th year of the Enryaku era, the emperor moved the capital from Nagawaka to the city of Heian. In the 21st year of the same era, on the 19th day of the first month, the emperor summoned 14 great scholars of the 6 schools from the 7 major temples of Nara, including such priests as Gonso and Choyo, to Takao-dera Temple, and ordered them to engage Saicho in debate. He was trying to settle the unrest of this upstart, Saicho. These masters of the 6 schools were notable to hold their own against Saicho, even for a single exchange of opinions, to the extent that their mouths became as incapable of speech as their noses. The 5 teachings of the Flower Garland School, the 3 periods of the Dharma characteristic schools, and the 2 storehouses and 3 periods propounded by the 3 treatises school, all of these doctrines were demolished by Saicho. Not only were the doctrines of the 6 schools refuted, but it was demonstrated how they all go against the correct teaching. We hear this over and over again, don't we? On the 29th day of the same month, the emperor handed down an edict severely criticizing the 14 debaters who had confronted Saicho, These priests, in turn, drew up a letter apologizing for their conduct and submitted it to the emperor. Thereafter, one sovereign after another paid allegiance to Mount Hiei, treating it with even greater deference than a filial son shows toward his father and mother, regarding it with greater awe than the common people manifest before the might of the ruler. At times, the rulers issued edicts to honor it. At other times, they were obliged to give their approval to its unjust demands. We may note in particular that Emperor Seiwa was able to ascend the throne as a consequence of the powerful meditations of the Reverend Erio of Mount Hiei. The emperor's maternal grandfather, the minister of the rite, Kujo, for this reason submitted a written pledge of his fidelity to Mount Hiei. The general of the rite, Minamoto no Yoritomo, the founder of the Kamakura shogunate, it will be recalled, was a descendant of Emperor Seiwa, and yet the government authorities in Kamakura, though they may or may not be following the right course in their administration, ignore and turn their back on Mount Hiei, have no fear of the punishment of heaven. In the time of the retired Emperor Gotoba, during the Kenin era, 1201 to 1204, this is just a couple of decades before Nichiren was born, there were two arrogant men, Honen and Dainichi. Their bodies were possessed of demons, and they went about deluding the people of both high and low station throughout the country until everyone had become a Nembutsu believer or else joined the Zen school. Those who continued to pay respect to Mount Hiei became surprisingly few and lacking in ardor, and throughout the country, the priests who were authorities on the Lotus Sutra or the True Word teachings found themselves ignored and rejected. You can feel the point coming on, can't you? As a result, the sun goddess, great Bodhisattva Hachiman, this is a local god of the Japanese, and the gods of the 7 shrines of Sanno, who guard and protect Mount Hiei, as well as the other great benevolent deities who protect the different parts of the nation, could no longer taste the flavor of the law. Their power and brilliance waned, and they abandoned the country. Thus, the demons gained access to the nation and brought about disasters and calamities. These disasters, as I stated in my memorial, were omens signifying that our country would in the end be destroyed by a foreign nation. Later, in the first year of Bun era, 1264, cyclical sign Kinoine, on the 5th day of the 7th month, a comet appeared in the east, and its light shone over the whole country of Japan. This is an evil portent such as has never been seen before since the beginning of history. None of the authorities on the Buddhist scriptures or non-Buddhist writings could understand what had brought about such an ill omen. I became even more grieved and distressed. Now, 9 years after I presented my memorial to the lay priest Saimyo-ji, in the intercalary first month of this year, the official letter arrived from the great kingdom of the Mongols. The events that have occurred match the predictions made by my memorial as exactly as they do 2 halves of a tally. The Buddha left this prediction saying, quote, 100 or more years after my passing, a ruler named Ashoka the Great will appear in the world and will spread my relics far and wide, end quote. In the reign of King Chao, the 4th ruler of the Chao dynasty, the grand historian Su Yu made this prediction, quote, a sage has been born in the western region. 1,000 years from now, the words of this sage will be brought to this country, end quote. Prince Shotoku predicted, quote, after my death, when 200 years or more have passed, the city of Heian will be established in the province of Hamashiro, end quote. And the great teacher Tendai predicted, quote, 200 years or more after my death, I will be reborn in an Eastern country and will spread my correct teachings, end quote. All of these predictions were fulfilled to the letter. When I, Nichiren, observed the great earthquake of the Shoka era and the great wind and famine that occurred in the same era, as well as the major outbreak of epidemics that took place in the first year of the Shogun era, I made a prediction saying, quote, these are omens indicating that this country of ours will be destroyed by a foreign nation, end quote. I may seem to be praising myself for having made such a prediction, but if our country should be destroyed, it would most certainly mean the destruction of the Buddhist teachings as well. The eminent Buddhist priests of our time seem to be of one mind with those who slander the law. In fact, they do not even understand the true meaning of the teachings of their own schools. It is certain that if they should receive an imperial command or instructions from the government authorities to offer meditations in an effort to avert the evils that beset the nation, they would only make the Buddhas and deities angrier than they already are, and then the nation could not help but face ruin. I, Nichiren, understand the steps that should be taken to remedy the situation. Other than the sage of Mount Hiei, I am the only person in all of Japan who does. Just as there are not two suns or two moons, so two sages are not to be found standing side by side. If these words of mine are false, then may I be punished by the 10 demon daughters who protect the Lotus Sutra that I embrace. I say all this solely for the sake of the nation, for the sake of the law, for the sake of others, not for my own sake. I will be calling you on you in person, and so I'm informing you of this. If you do not heed my advice, you will surely regret it later. With my deep respect, Nichiren. So he wrote this letter to a Reverend Hogan, and it's a little bit of background here. I hesitate to read that because I want you guys to read that stuff. So that's it. That's he's just declaring, I'm gonna write this document and I'm gonna deliver it, and I did, and ... So I love the next one, that Tripitaka Master Shanwu Wei. We're gonna enjoy that one. But so what can we take away from this justification for writing the Rishoen Gokuran? I had a wise friend in practice decades ago. She said one day, and she was a gal who was, let's say, less an intellectual, and I don't mean dumb by any means, but more in her rhetoric. She was much more effusive and playful, but in some of her statements there were kernels of great insight. And she said one day, she was talking to some junior members and trying to get them to resolve their issues, and she said something to the effect that all of us are our own country, and when we're fighting or disagreeing, we're like countries trying to position ourselves in advantage and disadvantage and so on and so forth. But her analogy of being a country, or being countries as individuals, had a really incredible insight into the teachings, because what she was seeing was that even when Nichiren, and there are current Nichiren groups, as there were in the early 20th century, who vehemently follow Nichiren's teachings, but interpreted them for their own ideologies in a very nationalistic and very segregating way, which is not what Nichiren is doing at all. So it's important to note that even though Nichiren, I would say, is a strong spokesman But it's, and so were some of the quotes in the last video that we went over from, I can't remember who now, but historical scholars of Buddhism who were talking about, you don't have eyes if you don't see what's going on here. I mean, these are very strong statements, right? And it's important, once again, to get to the meaning of why these particular scholars are so fervent or adamant or strongly opinionated about things. It would be easy to read that as a way of practicing, which I could see someone with a nationalist mindset would easily take it that way, or could. But I think it's important to understand that emphasis of this sort isn't about the world of anger or the world of intimidation. It's this kind of, this is an exclamation at the end of a sentence saying, please hear this, please consider this deeply, please do for yourself research to see for yourself this position, this mind view of the world, of the teachings, of whatever the subject is. I think that would be much more correct, especially when, as we're learning and reading through the Gosho, Nichiren was not free of emotion. Emotion is the samsaric human way of expression. I know we've heard a lot from other earlier sects of Buddhism and non-Buddhists who talk a lot about calm, and you should always be like this low hum, and nothing should affect you. You're human. And if you've anesthetized yourself with the teachings or on your own interpretation to the point where you can't have a sincere, compassionate reaction to something, then I'm telling you right now, you're not practicing correctly. Buddhists are not pacifist, quiet little monks. That's an ancient, gone away interpretation. I don't know what the heck that is, but it's not Buddhist. Buddhism does not deny our humanity. I guarantee you any of those sects or schools that are teaching that has at the end of life this idea of an ongoing life, an eternal self. This is completely foundationally against Buddhism. It just is. Nagarjuna sure nailed that repeatedly in his documents, teachings. Shakyamuni did too, but he didn't. He wasn't taken to task as people were in Nagarjuna's time, simply because they still hadn't gained the capacity to really understand the impact of that kind of thinking. So when Buddha taught them that there was no self, no non-self, no non-non-self, all of that negation, they went around and, well, that makes sense, but they didn't really consider the deep implication of that. That didn't come in conversation into sermons until later in Mahayana teachings, where the Buddha and other bodhisattvas dug deeply into the nature of the human mind and how that acts in juxtaposition to an enlightened mind, a Buddha mind, right? So, yes, we can attain Buddhahood right now in this lifetime, in our human state, but not at the expense of our human state, because the human state is what allows us to attain our Buddha state. They're hand in hand. They're right now. It's a matter of revealing an aspect of yourself that you hadn't seen before. You know, it's like being born with no arms. and chanting and doing things, and it's regular. Everybody runs around with 2 feet and figures out how to live that way. And one day you find a teaching and you practice it with great resolve. And one day you look down and you reach for a rock, and instead of your foot, an arm comes out and a hand picks it up. And you're in shock. What the heck is going on? Well, the arms have been there all along. You've just been blind to the fact that they were there. What are you going to do now? Put them away and pretend they don't exist? Hell no. This is like revealing your Buddha nature. It's already there. You're just not seeing it. And achieving Buddhism, awakening, enlightenment in this life is about living your human life with the knowledge that there's so much more clarity. Now everything we do in our human life becomes, the extremities become pulled in. The nervousness, the anticipation, the not knowing that creates all our suffering and our attachment to things is relieved more and more as we experience and bathe in our Buddha nature more and more. And so the pragmatic practice of Buddhism is about living a beautiful, happy, joyful life. Not to deny it, not to take it away. So at the other extreme, getting back to our introductory letter here by Nichiren, if we insist on our emotional, narrow-minded human sense of life, we will simply add and compound our sufferings to the point with millions of people that we actually impact the land that we live in. Look at the policies being enacted by governments across the world, countries across the world. This doesn't happen because one insane man takes over. Somebody allowed the insane man to be there. The insane man is a manifestation of the country's malaise. That should scare the bejesus out of you guys. It does me. I hear everyone complain, for instance, in the United States about, and the rest of the country, about Trump and his administration, because it's not, Trump's just a puppet, right? But the same thing's going on with Bolsonaro in Brazil and others throughout the world. I can't name them all. I'm not a political pundit. I'm not as much a scholar as Nichiren, although I wish I were, so I could be more convincing in my arguments. But you hear people say the same thing who are completely non-Buddhist. They'll tell you Trump is Chris Hedges says he was vomited up by this institutionalized crooked system of power and money and oligarchical ownership and manipulation. Okay. But all of that, if you strip away all the colorful words, rhetoric, it's about our behavior. So, I've heard it said in other ways in Buddhism, if you don't like the life you're living now, look at what got you here. Your causes, not who did you and what did, and you know, it was that fault and that fault. None of that. Look at your own life. Even when confronted with those things that you think manipulated your life, ask yourself how you responded to those things at the time. Because, understand it or not, from a Buddhist perspective, the reason that influenced you was because you allowed it to influence you. Right? You hear children talking about this. You made me do this. I didn't make you do it. You did it. Well, that's exactly right. What was another one that I used to talk about all the time? Was, well, taking offense. Those two words together just make me laugh every time I hear it. Why? Why are you taking offense? Offense can only be offered. It's something somebody throws out. Why are you trying so hard to receive it? Don't. An offense is simply that. A football team has an offense and a defense. If somebody's being offensive to you, then that's them being offensive. It has nothing to do with you. Don't take it. I think that's an amazing perspective on how our emotional attachments to things in samsara, our human emotional states, are so easily manipulated against ourselves. And we're the ones doing it. So now I'm getting very specific, very small. But there really is no difference between what I'm saying now and what Nichiren is writing in the Risho Kokoran. He's simply magnifying this and spreading it out. It's like seeing an effect of something minor and being curious about what's actually going on, and then magnifying it several times over, orders of magnitude, and then seeing that maybe it's a very subtle effect, or maybe it's a very volatile effect, a dangerous effect. So, enough on this. Again, comment please. Let me know what you think. Personal experiences or questions. Did I jump over something that left you in a quandary? Let me know, because I want to do this as well as I possibly can. And with your help, we'll help ourselves and others. So participate. Sangha. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. See you again soon. Bye-bye.